Hello guys, I'm Fisi and welcome to the second race of the ARL F1 2013 season. We are in Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia for this race, and as you can see on the screen there, it's intermediate heights on the car, which can only mean one thing. The race is starting out with a wet track. And I wasn't really sure if that was a good or a bad thing for me, to be honest, because I haven't had a lot of wet running on this game so far. But it was certainly going to make at least the start of the race very interesting indeed. And like I said in the video showing my qualifying lap, I wasn't too confident in my pace before this race. I could only qualify in 11th place, despite being on the prime tyres, because I had actually planned to go on the prime strategy if it was a dry start for this race. But I wouldn't really have got any higher in the starting grid, even by putting a lap on the options anyway. So P11, that's where our qualifying pace was really, quite disappointingly. So I'm starting 5 places lower than I qualified last time in Australia. So it was a worse qualifying, but the only way to react to that is surely to make it a better race than it was in Australia. Because I went backwards in the field throughout the race last time out. But this time I was aiming to go forwards instead and hopefully get a few points. And just to mention as well, as usual, the official highlights for this race will be out later in the week. So I will try to not reveal any results apart from obviously myself and the people around me on the track. But if you don't want to know any of the results before watching the official highlights, you should probably not watch this right now. But if not, I'll be very happy to have you along for this race recap. And as you can see, I'm now out on the grid and getting ready for the start. And as you probably saw, my teammate TraceMe92, not ahead of me on the grid this time, he's now on the place behind me in P12. So it wasn't a great qualifying for the Red Bull team, but anything can happen in this race, especially considering it's wet for the start. And now the light was going out in Malaysia, and I didn't get a great start, to be honest. I tried to limit the wheels by bogging down, but that wasn't working out at all, and I was immediately put under pressure by the Continents on the right and my teammate on the left. But I managed to brake a bit later than I'm going into turn 1. My teammate actually trying to hang it around on the outside, but that wouldn't work for him, as you're going to see there. He backed out of it. And I'm now going around the turn 2, trying my best to not hit the back of that Mercedes of Thierry McAuley, as well as the Ferrari of Big Shot player also ahead. So it looked like a very nice and clean start from everyone, which is very nice to see. No major incidents at all through the first 2 corners. Now going into turn 4 with lots of water drops in on my screen. There looked like there was a car going up the inside there, but so I just left a bit of room just to be safe, but it wasn't really any threat. And now McAuley managed to pass Big Shot through the long turn 5 left-hander, which looked like a very impressive overtake. And that put me right on the back of Big Shot for the time being, going through a double apex right-hander. And as you can see ahead, McAuley has gone wide off the track and almost lost his car, which means he dropped back behind me, and I had now officially gained a position and was into the points for the time being in this race. So 10th place is where I finished the race in Australia last week. So the question was now, could I hold onto this in this race or even improve and pass some of the cars ahead? And as you can see, my teammate's still following closely behind me because McAuley dropped back behind him as well. So, after only 1 lap in the race, we got a pretty interesting weather update.
Current reports are suggesting rain will stop in 10 minutes time. 10 minutes.
So rain was apparently stopping in 10 minutes time, which was quite interesting because that left us all wondering, would these intermediate tires last all the way until it was time for slicks? Would the track dry up quick enough for us not having to go in for another set of interviews before that? Because as you know, on this game, the tires, even the intermediates, are wearing out very quickly, but only time would tell if we had to come in and swap them for a new set before it was time for dry tires. So that was an interesting strategy element already in this race that we all had to consider. But as you can see here, iPro X Callum on lap 3 got a massive lag spike, which moved me up another position. Not particularly the way I like overtaking cars, because that was very unfortunate for Callum. But even so, I was now up to 9th place in the race, and Callum settled down just ahead of my teammate, TraceMe92 behind. So, on the end of lap 5 now, and as you can see ahead, Big Shot and the Force India of Jason as well, starting to pull out a little bit of a gap. They were around 2 seconds ahead at this point, but now there was a car in the pit lane. It was X-Matty G, one of the front runners in the race, who chose to do the gamble and go in for another set of intermediates because he didn't think that it would dry up quick enough for them to last. So it was interesting to see how that would pan out for him, but myself and most of the other cars stayed out still on interest. And now on lap 8, as you can see, some of the cars ahead were really struggling to stay on the track at this point. It's the Toro Rosso of F1X Crookie who's ahead and kind of holding Jason and Big Shot up as well. And while it had stopped raining at this point, the track was still wet and Crookie went completely wide off the track because the intermediate tires were completely falling off the cliff at this point, but seemingly more so for Crookie than for the rest of us. So at this point I was planning to go into the pits after this lap, And as you can see, Big Shot also struggling quite a bit at this point, which almost gave me a chance to get past, but he managed to stay ahead for the time being. So no, he was going very slow around this right-hander. I tried to have a look around the outside, but obviously that didn't work, as you can see there. And at this point I really had to be focused, because it was such a difficult job to drive this car on these tires. You can see on the display, the tires were completely red on the left front and the right rear. And now I'm side by side with Big Shot on the straight, but here comes X-G out of nowhere, who was obviously on much fresher tires at this point after having pitted earlier. But I was going into the pits anyway, so I just stayed back and let Big Shot and Matty have their fight. Matty was going around the outside, and there were contact with Big Shots, who tried to go in the pits. They kind of met in the middle there. It was a bit of an incident, which helped me to get ahead of Big Shot. And I think that he managed to make his way back into the pits after the incident, but obviously he lost quite a bit of time, which was unfortunate for both him and X-G, who carried on the track on his fresher inters. But I and quite a few others felt that this was the right lap to pit for slick tires, and I think that was the right call, because there was enough grip for these tires to work on this track. As you can see, both of us Indians now ahead of me. I was in 9th place after coming out of the pit lane. However, there were a few cars ahead who chose to go a lap longer, and as Crookie is about to pass me on the pit straight with DRS open, we both passed 3 cars who was in the pit lane who had been staying out a lap longer on the intermediates. So despite dropping behind Crookie, who to be fair was just quicker than me at this point, because I couldn't keep up with him after he passed me, I had moved up to 7th place in the race, meaning that I had gained positions through the pit stop phase. And I was just about to gain another one, because you can see Jason, 2 laps after I pitted for the slicks, he was still out on the intermediates, and they were certainly not working any longer because the track was pretty much dry at this point. So now I was amazingly up to 6th place in the race after just being consistent and pitting on the right lap. It wasn't going to be easy to keep the 6th place, however, because 2 of the league's quickest drivers, X-G and Ricky C, had both been catching up to me after the pit stops, and on lap 13, as you can see, Ricky C had a go at me on the main straight with DRS open. I probably didn't defend as hard as I could have done there, because he came as a surprise in terms of how quickly he closed me down. But now Matty was also trying to take advantage of my poor run through turn 2, and he went around the outside of turn 2 to take 6th place. I tried my best to get a better exit at him out of the corner, but I just couldn't do it, and as a result I had dropped 2 positions in 2 corners, which was not very satisfying, but at least I had a decent points position still in the bag in 8th place. So from this point on I tried my very best to keep up with Ricky and Matty, but it wasn't easy because they were driving very quickly despite having quite an intense battle actually. So although I couldn't get close enough to challenge them in terms of getting back past, I at least managed to stay within the 1 second zone to get the DRS on quite a few laps in a row. But as you might have noticed, as I went through the pit lane there, I gained a position up to 7th place because iPro X Callum was in the pit lane for an early change of tires. So from this point on I was driving a few laps by myself, not being quick enough to match the cars ahead, but driving very consistently, making no mistakes at all, and keeping the cars behind at a good distance. So after pushing on these prime tires for 10 laps, it was time to change to new set of primes, which worked out very nicely because there was now 10 laps remaining in the race, meaning that the last stint was also going to be a 10-lap prime stint. Obviously due to the wet weather earlier in the race, we didn't have to use both sets of the dry compounds. So I rejoined the track in completely clear air in 9th place, but that would quickly turn into 7th place because 2 drivers who stayed out a bit longer went into the pits on the next lap. That was the Force India of Jason 97 F1 and also the McLaren of Ricky C. And as you remember, I was ahead of Ricky C before the pit stops, which means that I had managed to jump him by pitting a lap earlier and getting the undercut on him. So he was now around a second behind me and on marginally better tires. But it was only going to take 2 laps until Ricky felt like putting me under massive pressure at the end of lap 21, and he's right at the back of me going through the final corner. But as you can see, the pit lane, iPro X Callum pitting once again, meaning that this was now a battle for 6th place in this race. And I'm defending the inside line, coming towards turn 1 to try to hold Ricky off with side by side with brake for turn 1. I'm on the apex though, but I've run a little bit wide, kind of pushing him out wide, but still trying to leave him enough room so that there isn't any contact. I maybe left him a tiny little bit too much room there because he is now marginally ahead as we both try to power out of turn 2, using a little bit of curse as well just to try to stay alongside him coming up to turn 4, but he is a car length ahead and I wasn't able to brake later than him, so he defended that position well to take a 6th place for the time being. But as I just noticed, as the Ricky went past me, he's on the option tires. So I was thinking that surely they will be completely dead by the end of this stint, because never have I seen a driver successfully do 9 laps on the option around this track. But that was his problem to worry about. For now, I just tried to worry about keeping up with him, and I was pretty confident at this point, because I had a very consistent and good race so far, and at the moment it looks like I was also going to be able to keep up with Ricky, and also had like a 6-second gap to the bunch of cars behind and not losing any time to them at all. And that was very helpful, because that meant that I could just focus entirely on the battle with Ricky. And now I'm having a go with DRS, and I'm going into turn 1 on lap 24. I wanted the 6th place back, and I just had to nail the braking point in order to do it. Bit of half drifting around the turn 1, but I managed to keep it on the apex and stay ahead of Ricky as well out of turn 2. And I was very happy with that, to be honest, because if you remember last season, Ricky C, one of the front runners in the league in quite a few of the races. So for me to be able to battle him for the 6th place in this race was pretty good. So for the next few laps, Ricky was staying very close on my tail, but he didn't get close enough to have a go to take back 6th place, despite me having lost curves actually for a few laps as well. And as we went through turn 4 on the penultimate lap, Ricky C, you can see the background there, he went wide off the track and lost a bunch of time to me. So it went as expected really. His option tires just were starting to fall off and became undrivable by the end of the race. And I can actually confirm that after the race, Ricky said that he didn't actually mean to go on the options. He wanted to be on the primes, but he forgot to select prime tires in the tire menu when he was pitting. So I could only say thank you very much, Ricky, because this now surely meant that I had 6th place in the bag. And going through the final sector of the last lap, I was actually catching up to the car ahead, which was the Torosso of F1X Crookie. He surely also had tire problems at the end, or he might have run out of fuel actually, I'm not completely sure, but he was struggling with something. So I turned fuel mix up the ridge just in a distant hope that I would be able to outpower him out the final corner, but unfortunately he was a little bit too far ahead. So I had to settle for 6th place in this Malaysian Grand Prix, and as you can see, I was very happy with that, weaving over the line. And the reason I was happy was that I had a much better race than I had expected beforehand. I expected an absolute struggle because my practice pace was not good whatsoever. But I managed to have what surely must be one of my best ever drives in terms of keeping my focus, making no mistakes throughout the race, and just having a very consistent race. As well as making the right strategy calls on tires as well, because that surely helped me to get to P6 in this race. And this result means that I got another 8 points, which takes my season total after 2 races up to 9, which is actually 9 more points that I had at this stage last season. So I think it's fair to say now that it's been a pretty good start to the season, considering this result. But as you can see on this little snippet of the standings that I've brought up here, this league is really competitive. It's extremely close in the midfield of the table at the moment. And I'm surrounded by other very quick drivers indeed, so I'm pretty happy to be currently bang in the middle of that group of 7 drivers, only separated by 5 points. But my aim for the season is to finish in the top half of the table, and right at this moment I am in 8th place, just about in the top half. So let's hope we can stay there. The next race is not one I'm particularly fond of. It's a Chinese Grand Prix. I never tend to get good results around there, so I can only hope that I can prove myself wrong on that next week. But that's for another day. For now, thank you very much for watching this race recap of my Malaysian Grand Prix. And remember to tune in for the official multi-car highlights of this race, which will be out later in the week. But for now guys, it's goodbye from me.